In this interview, I chat with my friend David duChemin about underwater photography, book publishing, and keeping your creative juices flowing. David is a world and humanitarian assignment photographer. He's a best-selling author, digital publisher, and international workshop leader whose nomadic and adventurous life fuels his fire to create and share. David is based in Victoria, Canada, but normally he leads a nomadic life, chasing compelling images on pretty much all 7 continents. David is the founder and chief executive nomad of Craft and Vision. He is the editor-in-chief of Photograph magazine, a contributing columnist to PHOTOLIFE, and an ambassador for Maptia.com. Hey folks, I have the immense pleasure and opportunity to sit down with a friend of mine. His name is David duChemin. He's well known in photography and education and publishing circles, and he's the guy behind a number of training initiatives for photographers. David and I have known each other for a while. We're gonna reminisce a little bit, and then we're gonna talk about some of the stuff that David has going on. David duChemin, dude, welcome to the show. I feel like it feels weird and impersonal saying that to you, but welcome to This Week in Photo.
Well, thank you, Frederick Van Johnson.
It's always a pleasure to chat with you.
It is. It's sort of, I love when you say we're just going to catch up, because it kind of feels like we're not going to let anyone else participate in this thing.
Yeah, it's right.
It's just, carry on with your lives. We're just going to catch up.
Exactly. Yeah, we're just pay no attention to the old guys in the corner catching up. So man, what's been going on? I mean, we haven't talked in like, what was it, like a year and a half, 2 years or something, but like we were saying before I started recording, every time we chat, it feels like it feels like we just talked yesterday, because we just pick right up and chat. What's been going on over the past, say, 2.5, 3 years with you?
So much. And I feel like I don't even know where to start. And in some ways, it feels to me a little bit like it's kind of same old, same old. I split my time between making photographs and writing books about making photographs, and having adventures on which to make photographs. So, it's been great. It's been a good couple of years. I keep telling people that the last 5-6 years of my life have been the best, hands down, the best years of my life. I'm having a lot of fun. We were talking before the show started. I started scuba diving 2 years ago as a way to be involved with new experiences and take my cameras to new places. And I'm having an absolute riot with that. The learning curve is unbelievable. I like the easy way out. People don't know that about me, but I'm not, I'm kind of lazy. And I thought, I'll learn how hard can it be? It's just going underwater with your camera. Oh my gosh. It has been so much fun, but it's been so challenging. And I do thrive on a challenge, but oh my gosh, I had no idea what I was getting myself into.
What are the big challenges though? Like, I've never done it. So being the ignorant layperson, my question would be like, yeah, why not? You just buy a underwater housing and you get underwater and you start clicking the shutter. Why?
And that's what I thought too. And it turns out everything's different. The light is different. I went in thinking, well, I don't need strobes or anything. I hate strobes. I don't use strobes above the surface. Why would I use them below? And of course, light completely changes. If you want color in your photographs, the spectrum of light disappears almost entirely, into just greens and blues by the time you're 20 feet under. So if you want to reintroduce the full spectrum of light, you need to bring down, lights with you, and the way that light works underwater, the way that it bends, everything is different. And on top of that, you have to do all this and make not just a sharp photograph, not just a well-exposed photograph, which is so much harder than I ever imagined, but you have to do that and compose and pick a moment, and you have to do that while, not getting eaten or stabbed or killing something yourself. Yeah. It's unbelievable. It's sort of like, it's like, texting, but while you're driving a Formula One car. It's hard enough when you're just, not that I advocate texting while driving, but it has been really, really challenging. And then you've got, a couple of weeks ago, I was photographing these sea lions in the water, and they're swimming all around you. They're so fast. And when you get underwater, you're just so slow. Everything slows down, and it's beautiful. It's very meditative, but you're clumsy as all can get out. You're trying to focus your damn camera. You're trying to get, and then you've got sea lions like biting you in the crotch. Ugh. You know, it's really fun. I mean, it's so fun, but I've gone from this fairly confident ability to go out anywhere and make a decent photograph, if not a compelling one, to a complete, I'm back at sucking so badly. I feel like I'm in kindergarten with the big thick crayons, you know, and you're trying to write, just never mind writing a word or a poem. You're having a hard time getting the lines together for the letter K.
Right.
You know, but it's been really, really fun. And I think I've always said creativity needs something to push against. Yeah. You need constraints. And it has been, continues to be a real thrill. So
well, how does this reconcile with, I remember, and I think to this day, you're still of this mindset of, you know, gear doesn't matter, you know, and it's more about the image and all that. But now you're sort of moving into this genre of photography where you're gear laden with everything from life support to you have to bring your own, you know, visible light spectrum down there and all this stuff. Has it changed your way of thinking at all?
It has very much changed my way of thinking, but in terms of the creative process, it has not changed my belief that the gear is secondary. I've never said the gear doesn't matter. Yeah. What kind of gear, what brand of gear doesn't matter. And I do think ultimately we will make beautiful photographs with the gear we have. If you don't bring your strobes down, you can still make beautiful black and white images underwater with ambient light. You just won't have the full color spectrum to work with. But certainly, you know, the kind of images that are possible depend very much on our gear. And it has just been a question of learning to embrace new constraints underwater and saying, okay, what do I really actually have to work with? Everyone has this. You know, I was just out photographing grizzlies in the north of British Columbia. And no matter what you bring, there will always be a bigger lens you wish you had. Or when you have your 600 millimeter on, you'll think, my God, I actually wish I had my 16 millimeter on. Mm-hmm. You've always got constraints. And this has just introduced me to a new way of dealing with a whole new set of constraints. And like I said, also trying not to die at the same time.
That's the other thing. Yeah. Because when you put it that way, it's, you know, all the things that like the positioning of moving back to square one in your photographic learning journey, and then overlaying on top of that the whole staying alive thing, and in the water, which is no longer our native habitat. You're essentially prey for a lot of species down there, so you got to literally watch your back while trying to get the shot and compose and light and all that stuff. It's that's got to be interesting, to say the least, right?
Yeah, it is. And, you know, but again, it is the same in the sense that shooting above and below the water, I was talking to my friend Paul Nicklin, who's a National Geographic photographer, and he's so talented, and he's got some incredible stories about these wildlife encounters. And he'll be the first one to say, you know what, Canon, Nikon, whatever, make your choice, pick your thing, get on with it. And he sort of has this paradigm when he shoots, and maybe the first 20% of what he does is just getting it sharp and get it like in focus and well exposed. After that, he says that's when the real magic happens. And it's the same thing above and below the water. So yeah, I'm laden with way more gear than I ever imagined. But at the end of the day, it's still not a perfectly sharp or perfectly well exposed photograph that is going to move people and engage their imagination or tell a story. It's all of that other creative stuff that is so important, and that hasn't changed at all.
And what's calling you into the water, David? Is it you feel like on land you've kind of gotten a little bored, and now it's time to try something completely new to refresh your enthusiasm for the art form, or is it some other draw that's pulling you into this art form, into this genre?
Yeah, I think it's a couple things. I think one, I mean, you know, is probably better than anyone because you've been there sort of from the beginning with me. When I had this accident 6 years ago and damaged my feet so kind of irreparably, at a certain point, I just had to accept that there were things I couldn't do anymore. But the hunger didn't go away, the hunger for adventure and that sort of thing. So I just kind of figured if I had a tank on my back and a camera in my hand underwater, I would be as mobile as anyone else. And so that's given me an opportunity to kind of pursue my desire to be, hardcore at something. But I think it's more than that. It is, as you said, there's this desire to kind of approach my art form from different angles. But, I've always kind of attached a desire to do good to my photography. And I think increasingly, I did and still do humanitarian photography, but I believe the greatest humanitarian task of our generation is looking after the planet. Mm-hmm. Because if that goes, we all go. And increasingly, the conversation about the care of our planet is going to take place in the ocean and around the polar regions. And so that desire is what has sort of pushed me into the water, is to at least be a part of those conversations, at least, spend some time listening and making some photographs and seeing if I can be a part of that. You're always the nonconformist. A lot of photographers are going vertically with drones and flying around. David's going underwater, right? leading the pack underwater. Have you experimented with flying drones around yet? I have a DJI 3 Phantom Advanced sitting beside me. I have not yet figured out how to update the firmware. In fact, I drained a battery trying the other day, and I just put it in its case and went off and photographed grizzly bears. But at some point, I think they're a lot of fun. I think there are places for them. I dread the day that I will be, because anytime we have a new technology, there are people that will abuse it and just look out for themselves. I dread the day that I'm on the Masai Mara or the Serengeti in Africa, and some, turkey is flying a drone over a pride of lions. There are places for them and places not for them. But I think I've seen some beautiful video work with them, and as a storytelling device, I think there's a lot of potential. Yeah, no, I agree. And I agree on all those points. But, like with any technology, whether it be something as non-advanced as a hammer, there's still going to be people that find ways to do bad things with them. So. Yeah, absolutely. And it's not the fault of the drone any more than, we're still having these conversations about, is it digital's fault that, we have all these bad photographs out there, and, was film actually better? We have the same opportunity with digital as we did with film to be mindful and slow down. Mm-hmm. It's our choice. The camera doesn't, it hasn't taken over our brains. Yeah. But unfortunately, too many of us, I think, abdicate the use of our brains when we photograph. And we hand the power over to the targeting computer, like in Star Wars, right? Exactly. And that's never a good idea. It's never a good idea. No. So speaking of these exotic places, you mentioned moving around the world and doing this stuff. So a couple of years ago, last time we spoke, you were running a really popular series of workshops where you'd take folks around to different interesting places around the world and show them how to make amazing photographs. In fact, on one of those adventures, that's when the injury occurred. What is going on with those workshops? Are you still running them, or what's the new plan? Yeah, sort of yes, sort of no. I took a bit of a break to kind of recalibrate and figure out exactly how I wanted to do them. I really enjoyed them at the time. In fact, I have most of the best friends that I have, the most important people in my life I've met on these trips. So they've been a really incredible source of good in my life. But at a certain point, I kind of felt like this is not the way I want to teach photography. I don't know that you can learn the kind of photography that I want to teach in a larger group. And 8 photographers to me is a large group. Mm-hmm. So I kind of took some time to retool it, kind of figure out how I wanted to do it and what I wanted to teach and what I felt was best left to other people, because everyone's got a different style of teaching. The stuff that turns me on the most is the creative stuff, and sitting down with photographers and helping them learn what it means to tell a story, learn what it means to create a compelling body of work that all works together on some kind of a theme. And so last year was the first set of mentor series workshops that I've been doing. So I will go, for example, this year, I've got 3 trips to Italy, a couple trips to India, and it will be limited to 4 people. And over the course of a week, we will create, individually, we will all create a body of work that at the end of the week we will show to each other and talk about, and probably over drinks and definitely over drinks. But in the course of that week, spend time doing a lot of one-on-one shooting, spending a lot of time sitting down, just one participant and me, looking at the work in progress and saying, okay, let's see what you've got. Where are your frustrations? Where are you feeling really excited? Where's your curiosity leading you to? And what do you see this being at the end of this week? Sort of really helping them with the creative process. Because I think most photographers at a certain point, they're pretty good at getting things in focus, and their exposures are good, and they're learning how to understand those things in more nuanced ways. What they really struggle with is how do I tell a story? How do I make something more than just great capture, man? Yeah. And so that's the stuff that I get kind of excited about, because it's not obvious. And I think having someone that's less of a teacher and more of a mentor, someone that's willing to sort of sit down and listen to someone kind of be really frustrated and laugh about it or cry about it until we kind of figure it out. It's really exciting. It's a lot of fun, and it's much more intimate to me. I can sit around a table with 4 people and have a conversation rather than 8, which starts to feel like the impact of that gets diluted, I think. Yeah,
that's interesting. A lot of things that you say resonate with me, especially the idea of getting back to storytelling, and I think that's. I've said this on the show before. I think in a lot of ways that is the art of storytelling is diminishing and being replaced with product demonstrations or feature demonstrations, because you get this awesome new camera that does X, Y, and Z now, and online for the first month or so after that new feature is released, you see lots of demonstrations of that. Like, hey, look, my camera can do this. Hey, look, my camera can do that. But very rarely do you see an example of that technology used in context or even as an afterthought in an overall storytelling piece. So,
well, most certainly, and I think because one is much harder, and it's much easier to promote a camera than to expose your soul, and doing something that taking a risk on something creatively is it's difficult for us, for everyone, even people that have been doing this a long time. It's difficult. In fact, sometimes it's the people that have been doing it the longest for whom it is harder, because you have a little more to lose. You kind of, or at least you think you do. Your credibility is on the line, and you try something and it falls on its face, and you think, God, okay, get back to the drawing board. It's safe to just say, hey, I got a new camera, and look at the great features.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to put a quote on this page, by the way. A David duChemin quote: "It's easier to promote your camera than to expose your soul." That's prophetic. That's gotta.
I think we should start making T-shirts.
I know that's too long for a T-shirt. People would have to get too close into your personal space.
Exactly. There you go. And really small print. Really small, tiny sans serif print.
Well, speaking of print, how about that? That's like the perfect segue.
I could not have done that better.
Speaking of print, you're about to publish yet another book, right? The second edition of Within the Frame. Tell me about that, and what led to this new edition, and what's the delta between this one and the previous edition?
I just love that you used the word delta without even blinking. That was awesome.
I'm a geek, dude. I can't help it.
Well, first of all, the first edition Within the Frame was a totally life-changing book for others, I'm told, but for me, very specifically, it put me on a track where, when I left. For those that know that I did comedy before, kind of re-embracing photography. When I left comedy, I knew that I wanted to teach as well as do humanitarian photography, and I wasn't sure how it was going to work out. Or what it would look like. And Within the Frame sort of gave me this much bigger stage than I ever imagined I would have, and gave me a chance to express my voice in a way that I wasn't sure that I would ever be able to do. But in 6 years, I think it's been 6, it may be longer than that, 6 or 7 years since then, things change, and we're always changing, and our vision kind of changes. And so this gave me an opportunity to go back to a book I can already consider very personal, already consider very good. It's one of the best-selling books in the photography world. In fact, it's both humbling and a source of pride.
That's great.
But it gave me a chance to go back and pull some of the photographs that, in hindsight, for the person that wrote that book 7 years ago, they were strong photographs and they worked. But for me now, the person I've become, I look back and go, I've got some stronger work. I have images that I would post, maybe the same images, but that I would post-process differently, and maybe rely less on the thrill of a really cool duotone preset, and rely more on the strength of the moment that was already present in the photograph, but maybe got a little overshadowed by the post processing. Yeah. So give me a chance to kind of update some of the things that I believe, and kind of tweak the book. I added some creative exercises. I added some new images. For those that have copies of Within the Frame that are dog-eared and needing a new copy, absolutely go out and get the second edition. But it's not for people. This is not a new book. This is a polishing and a re-expression of the original book. Where it will benefit is in allowing the publisher and me to present it to a new audience that maybe hadn't read it before, with newer images and with some newer stuff, and kind of get it out into the world and give it another shot. And long term, I'm excited that it gave me a chance to kind of, it's kind of like remastering an album. The technology changes and you might be able to do it a little better. Or maybe the first time you did the album, it was a little bit, it was a little too clean, a little too squeaky. And now you want to introduce a little bit more of that humanity and, put it on vinyl. So that's a little bit of the impetus behind it. And it's exciting. I'll tell you what was the hardest part was putting a new cover on the book, because I actually had to be convinced the first time to put the cover that was on it, but it's grown to be so important to me, this book, and the cover is so almost like it's like a symbol. And it was really hard to have to pick a new cover and finally just go, whatever the new cover is, that will become good too. Right. Yeah. I mean, I think it's a good photograph, but it's also hard because you don't want to pick, I do so much travel stuff, and you don't want to pick something that's so exotic that it makes people feel like, oh, well, I'm not going to be shooting up and, with nomads in northern Kenya. So this book doesn't apply to me. So we put a nice photograph from some of my Venice work on the cover. But that was the biggest challenge, was, as I think it is with a lot of photographers, just picking work that represents us. There's two schools of thought. You can either put absolutely everything that you create out online and let everyone kind of pick and choose, or you can put your absolute best stuff forward. And increasingly, I'm more aware of the power of putting your best stuff forward and giving people a little bit less rather than a little bit more. Yeah.
We used to talk about that on TWiP a lot. That was the former of those techniques was kind of prevalent on Flickr a while back, maybe still is to some degree. But the idea of, I'm going to shoot a bunch of stuff and then put it online and let the crowd use the wisdom of the crowd to tell me what's good, versus I'm going to craft one, maybe two images out of this set of 100 and present that as my best work. I think the latter makes a whole lot more sense.
Well, I think we have to decide what we want out of our art. I think if it's art by democracy, then put it out and let the people decide. But then where's the role? What's the role of vision in that? It's sort of, and again, we all do this for different reasons. And if early on, especially if you're trying to get a sense of what's good and what's not, and you're trying to hone your taste, maybe there's a role there. But I sort of roll my eyes when I see someone post on Facebook, hey, do you like this one better in black and white or color? Whether people like your image better in one or the other is vastly not the point. At least it isn't to me. I guess some people have, certain ego needs to fill, and that does it for them. But I think I would rather say, which one works for you, and let's talk about that, and then present that and do it with confidence. And hey, you know what? Maybe a year from now you change your mind, but it should be you changing your mind, not other people changing your mind for you.
Yeah, and everything is subjective and based on the situation. For example, if you're shooting something commercial for a client, you might, having the wisdom of the crowd, or the client, which is also the crowd, to tell you, yeah, this one's good, that one's not good for these reasons, or this one works better for me, or have you considered that shadow that's falling over the model's face or something like that. I think in those kind of commercial situations, having others' opinions might be valuable. But if you're shooting for yourself and you're doing art, for yourself, getting the crowd's opinion on that art is probably counterintuitive.
Well, I think you're right. I do think, however, that when you're shooting for a client, it's collaborative, and that collaboration needs to happen between you and the client. Yeah. One of the things that amazes me is that people are asking for critique and opinions online and not first considering where those opinions are coming from. 2,500 people telling you they like this more than they like that. Well, I mean, there's a lot of people that would rather go to McDonald's than a good restaurant. And so the taste of the general public, I would rather take if I'm going to get actual advice about my craft or my art, I would rather take it from a couple of people and get an understanding. Okay, why do you prefer this over that? Why do you think this is stronger than that? That then teaches me, and then I can move forward. Whereas throwing my stuff out to the crowd, maybe the worst thing that you can do for your art, because then you necessarily have to cater to the lowest common denominator.
Yeah, no. Yeah, very well said. Well, switching gears a little bit. So the second edition of Within the Frame is imminent. So that's coming out when will that hit shelf?
Amazon says it's coming out July 1st.
Okay, so 1st of July, which is right around the corner. So we'll tell folks about that when it hits the store. But with that, you are an entrepreneur. I put you in the category of the photopreneur. So you are the founder and the force behind Craft and Vision, and in a lot of ways broke a lot of ground for a lot of photographers that wanted to self-publish and kind of wrestle the creative control, the distribution control, and all those other controls from traditional publishers, and kind of do it yourself and sell books at whatever price you wanted to. In the case of Craft and Vision, initially you'd set the price really, really low. It was like $5 or something, I recall. But you paved a lot of new ground for a lot of photographers, and there's been a lot of people that came behind you that have also had success doing that. Question, now you're publishing the second edition of Within the Frame, and you're also still pushing Craft and Vision. What was the mindset behind doing a atom-based book per se versus continuing and maybe taking Within the Frame and publishing it under Craft and Vision?
I think they're very different experiences. I think in terms of legacy, I think the print book will far outpace a digital book. I think Within the Frame is the kind of book that you want to hold in your hand and dog ear and underline. Whereas digital books, I think, I want to inspire people. Of course I do through my digital books, but they are pretty cheap consumables in the sense that people don't give them the same kind of time. If I read a book on my Kindle, and I burn through novels and realize I got to the end, I don't even know the guy's name. I don't know the author's name because I haven't been looking at the cover of the book every day. I don't remember it. I don't have a tangible experience of sitting in a book, turning a page the way I do with a physical book. So they're different experiences, and I like them both. I spend my life looking at screens. So if I look at a photography book, it's going to be, I'm reading Dan Winter's Road to Seeing right now. It's a gorgeous book, and I get to hold it in my hand. I sit in my lounger with a cup of coffee, and I flip the pages, and I can feel the weight of the pages and the finish on the page and the texture of the binding and it just is very different. So I kind of consider print books I do them for the legacy, for the long-term experience of them. I do it because there's a certain amount of credibility from a print book that you don't get from an electronic book. So I'm never that guy when someone says, is it this or is it this? Are you more a wine or a whiskey guy? I'm like, why would you make me choose? Exactly. That's a horrible thing to do to me. I'm a wine and whiskey guy, not generally at the same time, but they're very different experiences. And the books are the same thing. So I will continue to create digital resources that are accessible, financially are affordable to people around the world, don't have to pay for shipping. So I love the fact that they are bytes versus bits. But there is a very real, tangible, and probably longer lasting experience from the physical. And like I said, my office is full of physical, tangible books. I love the physical. So I like both rather than putting one ahead of the other. And I acknowledge that they're different mediums. And so in some way they're different languages. It's not just that the ebooks are a digital version of a print book. They're not. They're their own experience, and they have to be written and designed in a way that reflects that. People don't buy my ebooks or any of the ebooks on the Craft and Vision store. They buy them primarily because they want to learn, they want to get information, and that's sort of the vehicle for it. But they do it in a certain way, and but they'll buy within the frame and probably pour a cup of coffee and read it in a much more thoughtful manner. So, I've got, I've just today signed, and not telling anyone what it is, but just signed another book contract, and we'll be writing something else that I've been working on for a while. And so I will always be doing paper book. I cannot ever imagine a world without paper books. I think we would be greatly impoverished by the loss of those.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that about the experience, because I feel the same way about magazines, for example, because, on an iPad, you could put thousands of magazines on there, but for some reason, and I've tried it a couple of years ago. I tried it, hey, this is efficient. I can have all these magazines, these photography magazines here. But for some reason, the printed magazine has a certain, obviously it's tactile, but it has a certain feel to it beyond just conveying the information on the page to my eyeballs and into my brain. It's, actually holding it and, like you said, turning the page and revealing something new on the next page. And it's kind of a physical thing, or flipping back really quickly without having to figure out what the controls are to go back. It's intuitive, I guess, is a good way to put it.
Yeah. And I think in the beginning, it was very easy to sell ebooks because there were so few of them, and even fewer of them that were good. Now there is no shortage of them at any price point. And I think we're going to see a return to, now that kind of particular itch has been scratched a lot, I think we're going to see a lot of people going, not to the exclusion of ebooks, but going back to print books as well. The idea, just like people have gone back to vinyl, we want that kind of, it's a much more human sound, a much more human experience. And I do think that, the real place of the photograph is not prints on the wall. I think it's in books. I think when people buy a book, they buy photographs, they buy it to experience the photographs. When they buy a print for the wall, many are first and foremost making a decision about their decor, right? They're asking, do I want to look at this every day, and does it go with my couch? Well, I don't generally make photographs thinking, which Chesterfield is this going to go with? Which wallpaper is this going to look really great with? And I think most of us experience more of the photographs of others that we experience more of them in books and in tangible printed form. And of course, yes, Instagram and that sort of thing, but that's a very fleeting experience. It's built right into the name. It's Insta. Yeah. It's in a moment and it's gone, and it's not very, you don't sit and mull. Very few people, I would guess, sit and mull over a photograph on Instagram. It's, whereas you get a book and you can sit there and just you get Sebastião Salgado, or, name your favorite photographer. I would rather sit with that book on my lap and just look at the photograph. So it's, for me, it starts with a respect for the medium and the acknowledgement that there are different mediums that we experience these things in, and therefore the experience is totally different. Yeah,
it's a more considered experience versus just a more efficient way of getting information into your brain. Right?
Yeah, and both are good. You just have to decide, would you rather have a really great glass of fresh squeezed orange juice, or do you just need the vitamin C and take a pill? Both will get the pill into you. Both will get the nutrients in. But what are you after? You can have a great cup of coffee, or you can have a really crappy cup of coffee. Both will be caffeine delivery mechanisms.
Yeah.
It just depends what you want. One is not necessarily better than the other, but I would say one is a little bit more human than the other.
Yeah. Yeah. And we are moving down a path where humanity is becoming scarce. So yeah, anything that we can do to get that back is a good thing, I think. Travel. So I want to talk a little bit about travel. So you are, and I think we may have talked about this in a previous interview, but you're a globetrotter. You're bouncing all over the place. And I think if I recall correctly, one of the times I asked you about travel, you were saying, well, you got to go to where the photos are, right? So, and that's one of the main reasons why you are able to get the shots that you get, because yes, you're technically competent, you're an artist, but B, you go to where the shots are. So the question is, are you, as a photopreneur, photographer / artist, are you going to where the shots are in order to generate content for the other initiatives that you're involved in, like say Craft and Vision and the book, and maybe training tutorials and workshops, for example, or is the impetus to go to these places and shoot, and you're like, well, while I'm there, I might as well make the most of it? How does that break down for you?
I think it's both. I think, I go the reason I go to a specific place is because that's where my curiosity is driving me at the moment. And, I think there are photographs everywhere, but maybe not my photographs. My photographs are going to be found where my curiosity leads me. And that is not, generally speaking, at home. Critics of my books have said, well, anyone can just go around the world and take pictures. Well, sure. But I don't think my photographs are good because they're taken in India or wherever. I think if my photographs have merit, it's because I'm passionate and curious and spend the time wherever I am. But there are places that just don't appeal to me, and my photographs don't work because they're exotic. I think they work, if they work at all, because they're human and they're interesting. But I have to somehow still pay the bills, and someone's got to pay for the wine that's going to go on my table every night. So, so I go with the thought that this is the place I want to go. Now, how can I monetize that? And I don't generally anymore think about creating content, because while people have long talked about content being king, I don't think it is. I think connection is king. I think you get there through great content. But if we just stop and we think about content as though it's just something we're putting on the shelf, that's way less interesting to me than making connections. So I'm thinking about what kind of stories can I tell, and how can I connect to my audience in a way that, maybe the stories are written and supported with photographs. Maybe the photographs are going to go in an eventual book. So I'm thinking about all of those things. But for me, it's about connection, and I connect in various ways. So I can go on a workshop and connect with my 4 participants. I can also be making photographs that will connect on Instagram, that will connect on my blog, and eventually connect with a broader audience through my books as well. So it's really just a question of, I'm creating all of these possible points of connection. How can I use them in various ways? I want to use them in ways that people don't have to spend money to see them and experience them. But if you want a fuller experience, then you can buy a $10 book or a $30 book from Amazon, or you can come on a workshop that costs, 100 times that. But for me, it's all about connection. Yeah. And making sure that I pay the bills and, put wine on the table.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe not in that order. So.
Well, preferably, but again, I get someone else to pay the bills for me while I drink the wine on my table. So,
there you go.
It's you gotta look after the logistics. I mean, Gary Vaynerchuk, who I respect immensely, he talks about clouds and dirt. You got to have your head in the clouds, but you got to have your hands in the dirt. Yeah. And that's what I do with my trips. I mean, I go to these places hopefully to do good, to do something for either an organization or to tell a story or whatever. But I work really hard to pay the bills in order to also keep my head in the clouds and do the things that the artist part of me, longs to do, and those things that kind of scratch that creative itch. Yeah.
I've got notes here. I've got three words to kind of close this on. Within the frame, workshops, which we just talked about, and water, which we talked about. So Within the Frame, you said that's coming out July 1st. And
it is.
At major booksellers all over the planet, I would assume.
Yeah. And it's available for pre-order now at Amazon.com.
Very cool. All right. I will be pre-ordering that.
Thank you.
Workshops. If folks want to be one of the lucky 4 that goes with you to some exotic location, how can they find out about that?
I think the easiest way is to go to either davidduchemin.com or craftandvision.com. Both have workshop links that lead to the same place.
Excellent. And then water. I want to see some of these shots of sea lions biting you in the crotch. Where
Well, I have the pictures taken while they were biting me in the crotch. But if you go to my website, you can go to the portfolios, and I believe there's a portfolio called Wild British Columbia that has that on it. I'm just pulling it up now. But most of my stuff is, if you go to davidduchemin.com, there is there's a portfolio link, and you can go and see all that. But British Columbia Wild, that's what it's called, and that's got photographs of grizzlies and stellar sea lions and that sort of thing.
Perfect. All right, we'll link to that. Cool, man. Well, thanks, man. I appreciate you doing this, and we definitely have to catch up in person. This is getting ridiculous. We're going to be, cantankerous old men by the time we actually hang out in the same place together.
No, it'll happen before that. I'm scheming. As you know, I've had some challenges with U.S. immigration based on nothing more than my nomadic lifestyle that they didn't take a liking to. But I now have a Nexus card, which means I can go over the border and visit people, and I'm working on a visa that would allow me to work and lecture and speak and do all that kind of thing. So I anticipate being available to the fine folks in the United States of America, or Trumpistan, depending on how things go in, the following years.
Oh man, I love it. Trumpistan. Perfect.
Well, I'm married to a Trumpistani refugee, so
jeez.
I have great compassion for all of my friends south of the 49th parallel.
Yeah, please wish us well. Okay, David, thanks a lot, man. I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me today.
Thanks for everything. Take care.
Yeah, take care.